Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I'm Richard and this is Lap of the World. You join us now for part 6 of our NA1 NSX Major Service Series, sponsored now in part by ATR, nsx-parts.com, for exactly what the URL implies. Now, whether you need OEM, custom, or aftermarket, they've probably got you covered, so give them a look, link in the description. Now, if you were watching the last video and you commented there in hopes of winning a nice little care package here with a beanie, toboggan, toque, whatever you want to call it, hat, and a pair of sunglasses courtesy of ATR. Stick around to the end of this one where I will announce the winner. Now, in the meantime, where we left off last time, we had a bit of a cliffhanger with the pressure test of the coolant system. So the common wisdom is once you reinstall the water pump, in my case I had some other hoses to reconnect, but in your case you may not have disconnected hoses. Either way, I had to reconnect some stuff to close the loop on the coolant system, at which point I wanted to pressure test it before I proceeded any further. Because again, the worst case scenario is getting done with a job and then realizing your water pump install wasn't as clean as you thought and you have to redo the entire job. So let me tell you how that actually went. So I began in complete honesty as I finished that last video to try and pressurize the system, but I wasn't making any headway with it. So I kind of took a pause on that, and then the next day convinced my son to come out and help me because I suspected I probably had a leak somewhere. So I had him actuate the pump while I looked around for leaks. I'll get to my air quotes in a second, which meant that I could go around with a bottle of lightly soapy water and soap test various fittings and things like that. Eventually I did find the culprit, which was just me being a little bit airheaded as far as what I had done. I had opened the heater pipe bleeder to facilitate draining the heater loop, but I had not retightened that fitting until I found that it was not tight with the soap. I then proceeded to continue to look for leaks though until his arms wore out, at which point I finished off the last couple of PSI to pressurize the system to 15 pounds, and then I've left it for 24 hours. And it is exactly where I left it. Thank goodness. Because that means we can then actually proceed with work. So having validated now that our validated now that our water pump installation was a success, we can proceed then on to the timing belt itself. So I need to get the tensioner back on the car, back in position at the very least. Then I need to transfer some match marks on the belt, then put the belt back on. Then, once the belt is back on and tensioned, then I need to spin the engine around manually a couple times to validate that my timing is on and that I've done things correctly. Only then will I proceed further with reassembly. Before we get to installing our new tensioner over here, I wanted to rewind a little bit and touch again on something that I covered in the last video, just so that information doesn't get lost, but also because I kind of have an addendum that I thought about and was then reminded further about after the last video. And that is the dowels in the water pump and their importance. You can see the little smaller holes here. These are for dowels that precisely position the water pump because all of the screw holes have, a millimeter of slop in them, which could mean this thing could shift around a little bit if the dowels are not present. In the past video, I said that the importance there was due to the positioning of this pulley and its, effect on timing belt tension and position, but really the pulley is completely secondary to this little peg down here. And the peg down here is kind of out on the end, so it's actually probably more prone to moving spatially relative to other things than the pulley is. And this is also the peg onto which the tensioner spring mounts. And this tensioner spring is what tensions your timing belt. So if this is off by a little bit, your timing belt tension could be off by a little bit, which may or may not be a big deal. It certainly has the potential to be a big deal, but it's one of those things where you need to kind of assess this risk for yourself. This is not service advice. I'm not going to tell you to go and redo your, timing belt job or redo a major service if you don't know if you have dowels, because, case in point, this water pump was installed with no dowels and incorrectly with Honda Bond and has been on the car for 60,000 miles and a dozen or more track days. A lot more than a dozen track days, let's be honest. And I've had no ill effects. So mileage may vary, just something to be aware of. but it is important. The dowels are important. Don't leave them out if you're doing it yourself. Anyhow, let's get the timing tensioner on the car. Since we won't be able to see once it's actually installed, let me show you where the timing belt tensioner pulley will go. It will rest on this peg on the outside of the oil pump housing, and then it will be tensioned off of the aforementioned peg on the water pump via the spring, after which it will be locked in place with a bolt into this hole here. The bolt in question is really a three-piece system, two of which are commonly left off, I feel. There should be the bolt. There should be a metal washer on this side, on the inside, that this is what will be interfacing with the pulley itself. And then there's going to be a rubber, it's probably not a grommet, is not the proper term, but a rubber washer that will go on this side. And this will smush up against the timing cover, sealing that connection. With the locking bolt threaded in, but only loosely installed at this point, you should be able to move your timing belt tensioner with just finger effort and let it wiggle back and forth. We want it to remain pretty loose and free playing until we actually apply the tension with the spring, and then we'll lock everything in place, but that will all come after the belt is installed. With the tensioner now in place, we can find a clean work surface and transfer our match marks from the old timing belt to the new one. As you do this, don't just set the belts next to each other and guess. You need to actually be counting teeth. With our match marks applied and kind of identified as far as which pulley they go on, we now have the belt sort of loosely positioned in the engine compartment down where it's going to go. And then there is a sequence. This is the part where you have to really start paying attention to orders of operations and specific instructions. If you can follow written instructions with great detail, then you should be okay. I will show a couple of tricks, but a lot of this is going to be kind of narrating what I will have done, because I'm going to have to pay attention while I'm doing it, if that makes sense. So we are going to start, though, with the sequence of installation being the crank pulley down there, then the tensioner, loop it around the tensioner, then we're going to come up to the front side and loop those two pulleys, and then we're going to pause for a second. All right, so we've now completed the first like 2/3 of installing the belt. We followed steps 1 through whatever by putting it first around the crank pulley down there, then around the tensioner, and then around these front two cam pulleys. Let me show you a couple of things there, starting down with the crank pulley. When you do go to put the belt on the crank pulley, it will tend to try and make a bid for freedom while it's not attached to anything else that provides tension on it. My solution to this was to use some light pressure from a plastic fingered wood clamp. I've seen other people use zip ties. This seemed easy enough to me, and I could get it to fit in there, so that's what I'm rolling with for now. That kept it in place while I went up top, first looping the smooth side of the belt around the tensioner, which again is currently loose. There's no spring in place, and the adjustment bolt is loose. Moving on then, I went over here to the rear, or rather the front cam pulleys, and lined up my match marks. So there is the match mark on the exhaust. And the match mark on the intake you can't see because I have this paper clip holding the belt in place, and that's so I don't lose my, basically lose my place on the teeth as I go to fiddle with the next step, which involves the rear bank. Now the rear bank is where kind of another crux of this process happens, and that you have to do a bit of a manipulation with the rear exhaust cam. Per the manual, you have to back it off a half a tooth, then you loop the belt around it, then you run it through the tensioner, and as the tensioner pulls its tension on there, that should advance, or rather retard, that cam back to where everything lines up with the factory marks. And then there's a process after that of actually tensioning the belt in stages that we'll go through. But for now, I'm going to put you guys down because I really need to pay attention to what I'm doing here. All right, so with some patience, we have accomplished more or less what we need to. I'm not sure if I can focus on that down there, but I do have connected match marks on the rear exhaust cam and on the rear intake cam now as well. I have another paper clip employed just to keep the the belt in place on the intake cam as I futzed around with the exhaust cam, because that was not actually easy. It's the last thing you loop the belt around, so you're dealing with a little bit of tension. You don't have a lot of wiggle room. But to back it off a tooth, I'll see if I can show you the view that I used for this. And if I can shine that down in there, you can see the line and the notch. And you can see the line has been advanced just, half a tooth basically. So you can see that the, it's going to be the top tooth in reality, but it's the leftmost tooth or the tooth to the left of the groove is lined up with that notch, more or less. And that gave me the alignment that I needed to then actually fit the belt around and get it lined up with my match marks back there from that tooth to the mark on the pulley. Now you can see this is a little bit sloppy still. This piece of the belt, as you can see, maybe, does not have hardly any tension on it at this point. So that's the next thing we're going to do, is we're going to go around in sequence and tension the belt in order. So step one was to reinstall the tensioner spring, which we've done. Again, the adjustment bolt down here is still loose. After that, and I've already done this, but just to kind of illustrate, what we've done is we've gone in order. We took the slack out of this section of belt down here by putting a box wrench on here and pulling it forward slightly. So you put your box wrench on, pull it counterclockwise. And I would advise keeping a hand on top of this just to make sure you don't spin the pulley underneath the belt if there is a lot of slack. And then you just rinse and repeat for the intake cam. Then you kind of pull it around here. And again, you want to keep keep your hands on things just to make sure. And then we did the rear intake, and finally the rear exhaust cam. And the rear exhaust cam, it felt to me like it felt like it might have slipped a tooth, but really what it was it was pulling that extra tooth it was pulling the half tooth of slack back out from where we advanced it half a tooth in order to get the belt on. So I can show you. You can largely tell that that groove is now lined up with a little notch there. So we are on time with our rear exhaust cam. So we should be good. So having gone around and removed the slack from the belt, we are kind of at the point of no return where we do our final tensioning exercise. So again, we have our spring in place. I have snugged up this lock bolt. I have not torqued it down, but it is snug now. And then we have the crank pulley temporarily reinstalled, and it's showing top dead center. Now you don't have the little marker on the timing cover to go by, so you just kind of line it up with the center of the water pump pulley, and then you can verify with the match marks on the cam pulleys. Now from this point forward, it's worth noting that we do not expect the match marks, our Sharpie match marks on our cam pulley gears. Those will never line up again, or they won't line up again for another 5,000 and some odd rotations, because math, given the differential in the number of teeth on the crank pulley versus the cam gear pulleys. So if those get off, that's not a problem. It's only a problem if you do a full revolution of the pulley down here, and when you get back to top dead center, you need to recheck your factory marks, the little dashes and notches on the cam pulleys, to make sure those still line up, after which point we'll do our final tensioning exercise, and then we should be done with messing with the belt. Doing this very carefully and listening. When I hear anything click, I'm going to stop. That might be a valve hitting something. Okay, so we've reset to number 1 top dead center. And we've double checked our timing marks. And I'm not going to try and stick the mirror down in there, but I did check the rear bank. Both our slashes or grooves and notches all line up still. So we seem to have performed appropriate rituals there. The next thing we need to do is the final tensioning exercise. So we're going to advance the crank pulley around till we find a blue mark lined up with everything where the white mark is currently. And then we're going to loosen and retighten and final torque our lock bolt there. Okay, and you can see we now have a blue mark at quote-unquote top center. So we are now going to loosen and then torque to final 31 foot-pound spec our timing belt tensioner bolt. Excuse me. All right, folks, well, this has been absolutely nerve-wracking, but we appear to have met with some success and have a timing belt successfully installed back in the car. After I did that last tensioning exercise, I did turn the engine all the way back around one more time to number 1 top dead center and re-verified the grooves and notches on the cam gears line up with each other. They seem spot on, so I think we are good to go. We also have successfully verified that our water pump is installed correctly and shouldn't leak based on that pressure test. And incidentally, going back a number of videos at this point, we can also verify that our Koyo rad arrived to us and was installed without damage or compromise, as it is also as part of that system holding pressure. So at this point, I need a beer. And one of you needs an ATR toboggan beanie stocking cap toque thing and a pair of cheap sunglasses. I don't actually, that may be good, I don't know. They seem fine, they fit nice. But that one of you is ATL Boy 101, who in the comments of that last video had just gotten through replacing the clutch pedal stopper in his NSX. So he spent some quality time, it sounded like, upside down in the floor of his, actually I don't know what year NSX he has, but upside down in the floor of his NSX, which is always a pain in the butt, having done both the clutch pedal stopper and the brake pedal stopper at various points in my ownership. So I think he's earned these. ATL Boy 101, if you want to reach out to me, you can hit up Lap of the World on Facebook, or you can drop me an email, richard@lapoftheworld.com, with your details, and I will get this in the mail to you. Congratulations. The other one of these that I have one more of those, and I considered throwing it in with this, but I think I'm actually going to give that one away on my Patreon. Now, Patreon is not something I've pushed very hard on the site because, or rather in these videos, because I'm terrible at asking for money, especially during a pandemic when a lot of people are hard up. But I do have some patrons over there now, so I feel like I should throw a bone. It is not too late to join. Any tier of patronage will get you into the sort of drawing, quote-unquote drawing, to get the other toboggan glasses set. And we'll give that till this coming Friday. So this video goes out on Tuesday. I'll usually have another video out on Friday, so I'll announce that winner on Friday on that video and also get in touch with them through Patreon, obviously. But yeah, if you do want to support the channel a little bit further, that's a good way to do it. Again, I'm not going to ask and not going to push that very hard because I understand, and you know, hey, I can fund this as long as I need to myself, but anything is appreciated. And I will start putting up a little bit more content over there as well, kind of some behind the scenes, cutting room floor, maybe some of the stuff that I wouldn't necessarily say out loud on a YouTube video because monetization, you know, stuff like that could end up over there. So if you're curious, head over there. There's a link in the description, but yeah, so for today, we're going to call it there. Now, as far as what you're going to see next, now that we've gotten this all taken care of, we can start kind of reassembling. Before I do that, I'm going to check the valve adjustment. Now, so the next video could be a valve adjustment video, but I'm going to check them all off camera, and if they are in spec, I apologize, but I'm not going to do that for the fun of it. I'd much rather get everything put back together and get out to a track sooner if they are all in spec still. If they are out of spec, though, I will dutifully do a video on a valve adjustment. So you could either see a valve adjustment in the next video, or you might just see some general reassembly notes, because there are still a few things that need, I think, singled out or parsed out of this whole process on the way to putting things back together. But we will get to those at that point. But for now, I thank you for watching this video. I appreciate all of your support just by viewing the video or subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to click the subscribe button if you've enjoyed this maintenance and major service series. Don't forget to check out ATR, NSX-Parts.com, who has sponsored this series in part. But until next time, this is it for this video. I'm Richard, this is Lap of the World, and I will see you all in the next one, if not at the track.